Welcome into another episode of Nick at the Foul Pole, and today I'm joined by Matthew Pine, as always, and the manager of the Aberdeen Ironbirds, Kevin Bradshaw. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah, so we're just going to ask you a couple, quick questions about your time at the Ironbirds so far. So, what's your path been like to this position? How's it been, coming to the Ironbirds?
You know what? I was lucky enough after I left the Tigers to get a infield position with Baltimore, and as an infield rover, and then it just happened to work out that they wanted to make a switch in Aberdeen, and they knew I had a bunch of managerial experience, so they stuck me in there, and it was the best move for my career, I think, yet.
Awesome. So Kevin, what was it like being, all those years in the Tigers organization and now transitioning recently into a new one?
Well, I tell you what, I grew up in that organization. I was there 29 years. I played 4 years. They gave me a chance to get to pro ball. I was an unsigned free agent and out of an NAIA school in Oklahoma. So they gave me the chance, and then I just was in the right place at the right time. I got hurt, tore my Achilles, and then Bo Schembechler, actually, the old Michigan football coach, he was the president of the Tigers at the time. A lot of people don't understand that and realize it, but he came in and he changed the whole outlook of the minor leagues. We went from, when I played, we had one manager basically, and he was an older guy that kind of just threw out the bats and balls and said, "Hey, go get them." But Bo came in there and he got a manager, a pitching coach, and a hitting coach at every level. He started turning around the spring training complex. He got a weight room in there. He got indoor batting cages. So he really did a lot for the Tigers in a very short amount of time. And then when I got hurt, I went back to spring training and I couldn't really play anymore up to the level that they needed me to. And so they offered me a hitting coach job in AA, and just at the right place at the right time. And from there, I just gradually. I was a hitting coach, I think, for 4 years, and they wanted me to manage, so I took over managing, and then started roving, and just again very blessed to be in that organization. They have a lot of great people over there. Wow, and I didn't know, being from Missouri, I didn't really know a whole lot about the Tigers when I first got there. They had Sparky Anderson.
Sure,
definitely when he walked through the clubhouse and stuff. And good thing about back then, all the coaches would eat with you. You guys ate in the cafeteria, and they would be right there with you. And then you started seeing some of these players, Alan Trammell, and then Al Kaline was around all the time, Willie Horton. And they're like, wow, that's some big time players.
Yeah, I know Baltimore certainly knows Al Kaline very well.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of an interesting scenario happened in Aberdeen last season when Noah Syndergaard actually pitched against the Ironbirds. What was it like preparing your players to face a guy like Syndergaard?
Well, you just tell them, have fun first of all, because you're going to see some stuff, and it's always, anytime we get the the radio guy might come in and say, "Hey, we got a big leaguer throwing against us tomorrow night or something." So the news gets around pretty quick. And those hitters, they come to the ballpark with a little bounce in their step, and they get in that cage a little extra. But we just kind of go over like the scouting report. Let them know what kind of pitches he has. They've all seen him on TV, but and then just to see their faces of the electric stuff that he had, that was priceless. That was priceless. And he, we talked about a little bit earlier. That was easy 94, 95, and 96, 97 at times. And, that breaking ball slide, he had a curve and a slider and a changeup that night. So they got to see what a real number one, pitching prospect or number one guy in the big leagues is like. And that's what they, the guys that you want to get to the big leagues, they're going to have to hit that stuff every night. So it was good. It was good.
Yeah, this is probably the best pitching they, will ever face until they get to the majors. Obviously AAA has some major leaguers or former major leaguers there, but Noah Syndergaard's just about as good as it gets. So talking about your time in Aberdeen so far, what's kind of like one of your favorite players you've coached, and a guy you found really, teachable and coachable up to this level?
Well, we were talking about earlier, Toby Welk. And I know I just had him last year. He was just there last year, but he really stands out because he came in there, as a Division III player. And we get a lot of guys that might be undrafted and have a little chip on their shoulder, but he came in there wanting to learn everything. I mean, it was like a kid in a candy shop. And he came in there, and we thought he was going to struggle a little bit. Hitting the breaking ball because he hadn't seen that type of pitching at the Division III level. And I tell you what, he was like a sponge with Tom, the hitting coach, and everything. And he wanted to know all the information. And I tell you what, he was just so fun to watch play, first of all, and to watch hit. And from a manager's perspective, you put him in the lineup, he was going to do some damage. So he stands out. But, there's been so many guys come through there. And we talked about one, Kerwin Mosquite. He was a great player for me because he had so many tools and could do so many different things. It's just so fun to watch these guys develop and get all these different types of personalities. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's so many guys that you can put in different spots in the lineup, and obviously Toby Welk, I thought might be a 7, 8, 9 hitter, but he really moved up to the middle of the lineup type bat. He just had so much success. But obviously Adley Rutschman appeared in Aberdeen last year. Everyone was very excited about it. It was Adley Rutschman mania. We talked about that with Jack Graham a few weeks ago. What was that like, having him in the clubhouse, and what kind of impact did he have on your guys?
Well, you know what? I had never had a 1-1 guy out of the draft. I've had some good high draft picks, but not a 1-1. So, when I heard he was coming up, they said, "Well, be prepared because it's going to be kind of crazy." And they were right. Every place we went, I mean, it was like the Beatles or something. We get off the bus and there's 15, 20 autograph seekers. But I tell you what, what a great young man that kid is. I tell you, he handled everything great. And I talked to him. And I said, hey, if you ever need help, and we tried to help him as much as we could, kind of keep the autograph seekers away from him as much as we could, especially when it was his, he had to catch a bullpen or hit the cage. There was autograph seekers down by the cage, trying to get his autograph while he was, warming up and just can't do that. But he handled everything so well. And I tell you what a talent he is. Wow. And there was one time in batting practice, and, you hear about his power, but he doesn't really show it all that much. And Toby actually said something to him and was just joking with him because Toby hit a ball out or something. And for everybody that's been to Aberdeen, that right center field and those scoreboards, I tell you what, you got to hit it to get it out, even in batting practice. And Toby was kind of joking with him a little bit and said, I got more power than you. And Adley said, okay, let's see what we can do here. And Adley put on a show that everybody, there were some people cleaning the bleachers and stuff at the time, and they stopped and they had to watch because he was hitting it halfway up the scoreboard out in the right center field. And it was remarkable. So, I'm really looking forward to seeing, I don't know when he's going to get there to Baltimore in the big leagues, but he's definitely going to get there and he's going to be a great player.
Certainly. Yeah, definitely. That's a great story. I haven't heard that before. So you got two guys you just mentioned, Adley Rutschman and Toby Welk. They did play for Aberdeen last year, but they did also move on to Delmarva. So what is it like as a manager having that revolving door for a roster?
Well, it's tough. You'd like to say, it's not, but it is tough because you try to develop a team, and you try to have some chemistry, and just about the time you get that developed or starting to develop, they move the guy. But I've been doing it long enough that my job is to move the guys. We have to, our coaching staff puts a huge emphasis on development and winning. Of course we want to win. And I know everybody in Aberdeen, wants us to win, but it's all about development. And if we do our jobs correctly, we're not going to hopefully have these kids very long. And once you realize that, and when you've been in the game, a long time, you finally realize, man, it sucks, losing Toby Welk, but and Adley, I think we lost them all at the same time. We had a bunch of movement one day, and but you know what? That's how it should be. And if we're going to get better at the major league level, that's what we got to do.
Yeah, I feel like there's always an emphasis in the minor leagues of development over winning, even though everyone wants to win, of course. But that all kind of revolves around the culture that, the coaches have to install in their players' minds. And how do you kind of keep guys positive as a coach, and make sure that, everyone wants to win and everyone's focused on their job?
Well, for me, I think it's just showing up to the ballpark with the right frame of mind. It's a grind. It's tough in the minor leagues. And if you get out of bed, you put your shoes on, you go, hey, this is going to be a great day. And I think a lot of our actions carry over to the players. So one of the things with the new coaching staff that we were going to have this year, we had a meeting, and that you got to have energy. You got to come with a smile on your face and be able to adjust, because that's minor league baseball. And one of the biggest things we are experiencing now in Baltimore is a new culture. With the analytics, with Matt Blood, who took over as the farm director. They have done a great job. Starting in December, we had meetings, and all our new hitting guys, are going through all the analytics. And even through this time off, we're constantly on Zoom calls and trying to develop a culture that is about development, but is also about winning. And there, sometimes you can take the high road and say, you know what, it's about development. But you know what, you take an organization like the Yankees, they're coming to beat your butt, and they're going to develop at the same time. So, I wish my record, was a lot better as a manager, but I'm not too worried about that. But in some more championships, but it's all about getting those guys to the big leagues.
For sure. And as a bit of a wrap up for you, what do you, and you just alluded to this, but what do you see as maybe one major difference between the current regime with Mike Elias and the previous one?
It's the analytics.
Yep.
By far. Before last year in Aberdeen, they gave us some extra interns. And they started pulling up some analytical stuff. But this year, it is all about analytics. And being a kind of old school manager, I'm still trying to jump on board with everything that they're coming up with, because it is unbelievable, these Zoom calls we're having and what these guys come up with. I mean, we can see if you hit a 2-2 slider, 2 years ago, off a Watt pitcher. I mean, the scouting reports are unbelievable now. So, and that's what really, being that old school, I was like, man, this was 1 year I would have loved to be in there, because we got, between the shifts and all the data that they have now, this game is really going in a different direction, in a good way,
And as a follow-up to that, you're seeing more of a difference with analytics this year than even last year. There's more of analytics taking place.
Oh yeah. It is unbelievable, because they've hired. I guess it's the number of guys too they've hired. They've hired so many guys that are so bright, so intelligent, that anything, we're working on a PowerPoint now of just first and third defense. Where to play your defense in certain situations, what the numbers tell you. Because again, the old school managers, we could always look at stuff and had a feeling, but now the data. You know that the win expectancy, if you're on defense and they have first and third, nobody out, and you're down 1 run, you can't allow another run to score, or your win expectancy is going to be nothing. And you got run expectancies. So we're doing a big PowerPoint now on all that. So it's just been a lot of fun trying to take it all in, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks for your time. It's you're a busy man, so we appreciate you coming on.
Zach, Matt, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right.
So that was our interview with Kevin Bradshaw, the Ironbirds manager. Definitely some great stuff. I never knew that story about Adley, putting on a show.
Yeah, I find it, pretty believable because, he's a competitor. I mean, all these guys are huge competitors. And, Toby Welk seems like the guy who would just, say something like that to Adley. It's a great story to hear. And it's a great thing that Adley's, trying to work on power a little bit. I thought that it was interesting that Kevin brought up that, he hadn't tapped into his power as much in Aberdeen. And maybe, Toby said something that got him to do it more. So it's really interesting for sure.
Yeah, and I think along these same lines, we wanted to kind of touch on some of the coaching staff, the current Baltimore Orioles, and just look at, what they have now and maybe how that could help the younger players' development. So, Zach, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, so, the guys on the Major League coaching staff have been here mostly for about a year. And they've done an interesting job with what they've had so far. They don't obviously have a ton to work with. They don't have Mike Trout on the team. They don't have a team of superstars. They're not expected to win with these guys right now, but I think it's always good to review them, and we haven't really talked about them too much, and the job they've done so far. So I think we can't look past the staff without talking about Brandon Hyde. To start it off, what were your thoughts on him last year? And then I'll kind of give my points.
Yeah, I think he was walking into quite the difficult situation. So especially when he first got his feet wet, I think it was a little bit difficult for him. I don't know if he anticipated, how strongly he would take all the losing. And I think if you ever watched his post-game press conferences, that was pretty evident on his face. And then obviously got to talk about that he gets into a fight with Chris Davis. I mean, that probably wasn't his doing or anything. He wasn't
highlight of the season.
It was the highlight of the season. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, that was a bad look, but I think putting all that past us, I think he did a pretty good job with what he had to work with.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. There's some little things I think you can nitpick with him. I don't think he was perfect. Like you said, I mean, he was just devastated by the losing. I don't think he ever expected this. His face got gradually sadder. If you looked at him in April, he was like pretty much smiling at the end of games, and by August he was like full out fury. But yeah, that's to be expected when you've got a team winning only 50 plus games. So I thought he did an okay job. I thought the lineups he put out were pretty solid. I always like, how, where he kind of put guys in the lineup. There are a few guys maybe that I, thought should have led off instead of Hanser Alberto in certain situations. And, you kind of got to work with the leadoff man and the 9-man. I thought that's something he could maybe improve on a little bit. But I loved his putting of Trey in the 3-hole almost every day and Santander in the 4-hole. I thought the lineups were pretty good. His bullpen usage, I think, is something to be desired so far. I just go ahead.
I think that makes us appreciate Buck even more. Putting the Zach Britton playoff thing aside, I think Buck Showalter was one of the best in the game at that. So it's kind of like that's what you have to go off of.
He did handle a bullpen just about as good as you can. I mean, Buck Showalter is the prime example of how to handle a bullpen. And like you said, Britton aside, because that's an anomaly, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But I think that Brandon Hyde, he just needs to figure out how long the leash is for his starters a little bit more. Obviously these guys are new to the system. They're new to him. He doesn't really know too much about them. Even the catchers don't know that much about him yet. So maybe just trying to figure out a little more of how long a guy can go, whether it's John Means who might be able to go 7 a night, or Woj who can go maybe 4 a night. You just gotta understand where to put that bullpen in a little bit more. And then I want to touch on Michael Givens right now, because I think Michael Givens was probably the most misused pitcher in the bullpen last year. Do you think that was more of a Brandon Hyde thing, or do you think that was more of a overall pitching coach kind of thing?
I think there's a couple factors here. I think Michael Gibbons, without a doubt, is a 1-inning reliever and should only be used in 1-inning appearances.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at the difference between his ERA and 1 inning versus 1 inning plus. It's astronomical, the difference. And I think there may be something else to this besides Brandon Hyde, and I really question if the front office had anything to do with this and say, maybe we want to boost his trade value to say he can go multiple innings. So I think that's also a possibility.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. I really would have liked to see Gibbons in more closing opportunities. I really didn't think he got enough opportunities there. The Orioles didn't obviously have a ton of games to close, of course, because we only won, only 50 plus games. But I really would have liked to see Gibbons there more. Like you said, they tried to stretch him to 2 or 3 innings when I really don't think he should have ever gone to that, because he is horrible once he gets to the lineup the first time. But he's a guy with a ton of talent. Like you said, maybe they want to boost his trade value a little bit. But he has so much talent that I just think he is in that prime closer spot. There's no one else better to do it. Even Hunter Harvey, I mean, he's still building up as a reliever, and hopefully he can be in that closer role later on. But Givens was misused, and I just thought that was maybe a little bit of a Brandon Hyde thing.
Yeah, and I think there's a theme here with the coaching hires, and I think it starts first and foremost with Brandon Hyde. Obviously, he was, in charge of the farm system for the Cubs. He was bench coach for the Cubs. He was working in the Marlins system for, basically 10 years. So I think there's a clear pattern as to how they want to evaluate their coaching staff and how they want them to proceed with their methods.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'd boil it down to. So moving on from Hyde, what do you think about Tim Cousins? Is he a guy that, he's labeled as this catching guru?
Mm-hmm.
Is he a guy that really impressed you with, working with Chance Sisco and Pedro Severino?
Well, if you're going to bring up Chance Sisco's name, I don't know about that, but I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think Tim Cousins is more of a behind-the-scenes type guy, and he might even be like a good chemistry piece for Brandon Hyde, because they basically grew up together in various systems. So I think just having those two on the same team, I think it just makes Brandon Hyde more comfortable as manager to have somebody like Tim Cousins. As far as the development for the catchers, I don't really know if I can speak to that. I think, at least Pedro Severino, he showed market improvement with the Orioles versus with the Nationals. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, and Pedro Severino, I really want to touch on when we talk about Don Long, the hitting coach. But I thought I really wanted to see Sisco improve. Everyone was saying before the 2019 season that, maybe his pop times will improve, his arm accuracy will improve, his arm strength will improve, all these things that Tim Cousins could kind of fix. His blocking, of course, which is, all where Chance Sisco really lacks. He's never been a good defender or catcher. Everyone always thought he was going to move to maybe second base or third or wherever. But I don't really think Cousins has enough control to make Sisco an amazing, defensive catcher. I just don't think that's his profile. And, like you said, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do think that, he maybe helped a little bit. I don't think Sisco was as disastrous as he was in 2018. But I guess, I guess Tim Cousins, we're just going to have to see down the road whether he sticks around and has to, help Adley Rutschman, see how much better he can make him, for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's going to be a part of the future just for Adley,
Yeah, he's definitely got to keep around. I mean, even if Brandon Hyde's gone, which is something I think we should touch on later, Tim Cousins maybe sticks around. But I do want to talk about Don Long, because he was one of my favorite hires of the Elias regime. I just thought that was a fantastic hire. Former hitting coach for the Reds. This guy is just one of my favorites on the staff. He seems like he really knows how to increase hitting. I mean, he's just that's their job, and that's what he's done. If you look at most of the numbers from all of these guys, you just look at insane improvement across the board. Renato Nunez and Pedro Severino are my two prime candidates to show how great Don Long has done. I just think he's been great.
Yeah, I mean, you look at unlocking the ability of Trey Mancini. We knew it was there, but I mean, he put on such a show. A guy like Hanser Alberto, who was basically a nothing waiver claim, who turned into a plus, 300 batting average hitter. So I like him a whole lot. And, like you said, eventually, coming from the Reds, he worked with Joey Votto, who was, before this last season, he was one of the most proficient hitters in all of baseball for a very long time.
Absolutely.
So, Don Long's bounced around a little bit in baseball, but I think that's a good thing because I think that gives him experience with many different hitters and hitter types.
Yeah, I love the Joey Votto, bringing that up, because Joey Votto is one of the best hitters, ever to live, I would say. I mean, I know that might be a stretch, but he is, a perfect combination of contact and power and vision and discipline and all the things that a great hitter makes up. And obviously, like you said, last year wasn't great, but I think maybe Long brought some of those tendencies to the Orioles and showed some of the guys, like you said. Trey Mancini went from a 240 hitter to a 290 hitter, almost 300 for most of the season last year. Nunez went from hitting it's a great caption. Nunez went from hitting, I think it was 7 home runs to 31 last year.
Yep.
Just unlocked so much potential with these guys. Pedro Severino had been the worst offensive player in the majors, even worse than Chris Davis, over the past couple of years. And he turns him into a hitter, hits about 250, hits about 12, 15 home runs. I mean, I think there's so much that was done by Long just to make this offense better. I know there was, a lot of rumors that maybe the Orioles have a top 15 offense this year. I really think that's so much to thank, we can really thank Long for that.
Yeah, no, all great points. I think he's, I don't know if he's going to stick around, but I think he's a good mentor and brings a ton of experience to the table.
Yeah, that's how I draw it up. Another guy who has tons of experience, former major league pitcher, of course, is Doug Brocail. This is not one I was so fond of, and I'm not personally fond of any of the pitching coaches the Orioles have had in a long time. It just never seems like we get a guy who's, just able to help these guys become better pitchers in Camden Yards, which is such a hard place to pitch.
I like Doug Brocail a lot, and that's mainly from his interviews because he always brings like a nuanced opinion. He doesn't give you like the same canned answers that most coaches do. And something about him, like, I think Elias brought him in because of the familiarity with the Astros. And actually, back in 2010, he was he served as a special assistant to the GM back in Houston. So he has a little bit of that front office experience and the player experience, and now the coaching experience. So I think he's a good one. But like you said, it's just Orioles pitching coaches are a dime a dozen.
Yeah, it never seems to work out that well. I was really excited for Brocail because I thought he may, turn some of these guys around, like Dylan Bundy, which didn't end up really happening. But obviously, we won't get to see, how Dylan Bundy does this year, hopefully. But we'll see what he does with the Angels if he becomes a better pitcher, and we'll see how the Orioles really screwed him up. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But yeah, Brocail's a guy I don't think will stick around. I don't really think he's a long-term piece, but he does have so much experience in the field. So, not a guy I get terribly excited about, but I think he just is what he is, I guess you would say.
Good way to put it.
Let's talk about Anthony Sanders. And this is a new guy in the Orioles organization, came over from Colorado. He's worked in USA Baseball. He's worked in a bunch of different places now. I personally don't know too much about him. I really don't know how great he is. But, now he's the first base coach, which is also the outfield coach. So what are your thoughts on him?
No, I mean, you basically brought up all the points I was going to say. Team USA, I think that's a big part of it, too, because working with these young guys, he clearly has experience with that. 14 years in the Rockies organization. It's kind of weird that we've had 3 first base coaches in 3 years. But hopefully he's a guy that sticks, and that outfield positioning cannot be taken for granted because that prevents runs. So it's, he has more to do than just being the first base coach.
And I definitely think we have to touch on Arnie Baylor too.
Yep.
Because Arnie Baylor was the first base coach last year. Obviously, he's not with them anymore. I honestly couldn't give you a good reason why they let him go. It's probably the reason that, the outfielders were just horrific last year. I mean, just misplaying balls left and right. DJ Stewart got hit in the head. Anthony Santander threw a ball into the ground.
That's not Arnie Baylor's fault. Come on.
It was a really bad year, outfield defense wise. So
no,
maybe
I'm saying DJ Stewart
reason.
getting hit in the head. That's not.
It wasn't Arnie Baylor's fault, but these guys did not read balls well. There's also a reason that they're all, kind of unathletic outfielders that are more first base DH types.
Yep.
But they did not play the balls very well. Maybe that's why he got let go. We'll see if Sanders can kind of improve on that. I think, like you said, it's so much experience working with the young guys, and that's basically everyone who will be on the team in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's kind of exciting. let's move on to the infield coach and the third base coach, Jose Flores. Obviously, I was extremely sad to see Bobby Dickerson get let go a few years ago because I thought he was great. But Jose Flores, what did you think of him last year?
I don't know if I'm the biggest Jose Flores guy, and I only say that because it seems every time he's on camera, he's like getting into a fight with a player or something. He just seems like very argumentative, but maybe that's a coaching style. Maybe that's saying, "Oh, I'm going to get the best out of you, whether you like it or not." So I'm not his biggest fan per se. I believe he actually coached in the Pan American Games, which is kind of similar to Team USA. So he's got that experience behind him. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, the third base coach is always the punching bag of any major league coaching staff. Mm-hmm. It always is because they're the windmill. They're the guys who decide whether runs are going to score, and often they do not make the right decision. Flores was okay with that. Waving guys around third. Obviously, we're talking about, and showing guys to go home on sac flies, that kind of stuff. I thought he was okay. Bobby Dickerson waved a lot more guys around than Jose Flores did this year. I knew no big complaints. The infield wasn't great, but it was serviceable. I thought Rio Ruiz played nice third base. Mm-hmm. Richie Martin was average defensively at short. Even Mancini played a solid first base a couple times. Hanser played a nice second base. It was overall a solid defensive year for the Orioles, and obviously Jonathan Villar is not with us anymore. Played all right at second base too. Flores is okay. He's okay. I'm not going to get too excited about him. I think that I do want to see how Jose Iglesias, works with him, and mm-hmm. maybe we can see Iglesias have a Gold Glove year. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll just see with Flores how he does this year. Definitely a guy who needs a second year to have another look at him, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and one of your personal favorites, I know, is Freddie Gonzalez. And we can't talk about a major league coaching staff without talking about Freddie Gonzalez. I'm going to let you take this one because Freddie Gonzalez is your guy.
He's my guy. We got to meet him at one of the events that the Orioles held in the wintertime. Seems like a super down-to-earth guy, really nice. We were playing cornhole, and he was kind of heckling us a little bit, but, that's just all in good fun. But I love Freddie Gonzalez. I think he has a pedigree of winning. When he was with the Braves, 3 out of the 5 years, he finished in the top 5 in Best Manager by the BBWAA. So, I think he brings that culture with him. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's probably Brandon Hyde's number 1 fan. Spent that time with the Marlins that they did together. So I think he's going to be really supportive for Brandon. And Brandon doesn't have a leg to stand on. If he's on a 5 or 10 game losing streak, he can rely on Freddie Gonzalez, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said. He's, got a definite pedigree for winning. He loves winning. He's got a great personality. He heckled us, like you said. I wasn't doing so great that day, so it was worth the heckle. But he's going to be a good culture guy. I feel like he's definitely one of the guys who can really promote that excitement and the winning culture. And even when these guys are going to lose possibly 100 games, he's going to be the guy that's saying, come on, guys, this is all about the development. We're not supposed to be winning, and just keep that culture going that Brandon Hyde instills. And I think he's a really good coach. I really like this hire. They really list him as just a major league coach, so I'm not really
mm-hmm.
sure what his entire duties are, but I guess mm-hmm. it's just kind of overall everything. It's a backup Brandon Hyde. That's really what it is.
Yep. No, I think he would he would fill in nicely if he has to talk to a player. Maybe a player doesn't want to go up to Hyde. I think he would be a good kind of conduit for that.
Absolutely. He's a guy that really gives off really good vibes. Like, you could definitely go up and talk to him about any kind of issue you're having baseball wise. I mean, he's just mm-hmm. a guy who would, help you solve it. You don't want to talk to Brandon Hyde. He might get in a fight with you. Go talk to Chris Davis about that. But that's about it for the coaches. There are some other guys like the bullpen coach, Darren Holmes, who mm-hmm. obviously is just in his first year here. Jose Fernandez, yes. So obviously, I think we touched on the big guys. I'm looking at maybe only 1 or 2 of these guys to be here as the rebuild goes forth. If we look at the Astros model,
right.
If we look at the Astros model, they didn't stick with coaches too long.
No.
So I'm thinking Tim Cousins is definitely a guy to stick around. I don't think
mm-hmm.
there's a better guy anywhere to mentor Adley Rutschman.
Yeah, no, I think you got the nail on the head. I don't know. Brandon Hyde still lives in Illinois. So that either tells me that he's really connected to the Cubs still, or he didn't receive like a longer term contract. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn there, but I think Brandon Hyde might be this team's Bo Porter, like you said, with the Astros, just kind of be there for a couple years until they're ready to win and take that next step.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm pretty much pleased with all these guys so far. I'm just not going to complain too much because it's basically 1 year for every guy in this organization. So we're just going to have to see how they do and see if they earn the right to stick around. But so far, Don Long's got to take my prize as my favorite so far. But we can't talk. We can't have a podcast this week and talk about all this stuff without talking about everything that's going on in Major League Baseball right now. All the labor negotiations, they're trying to come to a deal. Manfred is being Manfred. This is not surprising what's going on. And now, a couple players and some organizations have COVID. This is a whole mess. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've said this, before. I'm just so tired and sick and tired of the back and forth. Like, I'm definitely on the player side, but at the same time, I'm just tired of the bickering and just like, just get a deal done at this point. I understand. I certainly understand where the players are coming from. They don't want to play a shortened season that's 70% less than what they would have made. And then the owners got to be the owners. They gotta protect their money. Although I don't think baseball is necessarily bleeding for money, but I think this has been overarching. The worst look has been on Rob Manfred for not getting the two sides to come to an agreement.
This has been horrible. I think there's a lot of doomsday stuff flying around right now. Baseball's ruined, baseball's doomed, and I'm not going to say it's that. That's way too far. That's way too extreme. But this is a terrible look for baseball. I worry about the 2022 strike, possible lockout. I think that's all things to worry about right now because these two sides are just so far apart. Manfred, the Players Association, Tony Clark, they are just so far apart. And they're going to have to come to something, some kind of mutual agreement here soon, or baseball is, headed down the wrong track because this is not a good look. You've got Adam Silver, who, in the NBA, who just completely and easily implements this, a season. I mean, you just don't have that in MLB right now. So Rob Manfred's under fire. You go on Twitter, your entire timeline is filled with Rob Manfred hate. But it's on both sides. The players said, "Oh, tell us when and where." And then they basically lied, more or less. They said tell us when and where, but they didn't accept the new proposal. So for 60 games, so we'll just see what happens. But I'm looking at probably they're going to meet in the middle at 65. I think that's the only way anything's going to happen here. The players want 70, the owners want 60. It's a whole mess. It's not going to end anytime soon either. I think this could go for another 2 weeks.
Yeah, so, if you're listening along, comment, your thoughts. What do you think about the whole saga? Are you on the player side, owner side? You don't care. You just want baseball to come back. So just comment along and we'll post your comment up here. I personally, I've never been a big Rob Manfred fan. Ever since I've seen saw the documentary Screwball, all about Alex Rodriguez and the steroids. Manfred clearly tried to cover all that up. And he just doesn't seem like the most honest guy in the world. This is just another, it reflects poorly on him, really. So
it does.
Just another instance. And I sincerely hope, I know this isn't kind of the way with baseball, but I hope we get a new commissioner who can actually unite the sport and actually cares about the long-term growth about the sport more than the short-term gains, I would say. And I think Manfred's short-sightedness, you can see that with, closing down advanced media and, some other things. So.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I mean, Manfred is – I really haven't paid too much attention to him over the years. I really just don't care about the commissioner all that much. I mean, you see him at the podium for the draft every year. It's just not someone I really ever thought about. But now I just have seen how terrible this is. It's just awful. Every aspect of the Major League Baseball front office is, just awful. And Justin, he's saying the NBA and MLB aren't, similar. And obviously that's true because NBA already had a season going, and MLB has to start one up. But it's still a terrible look for us. It's a terrible look for everything Manfred's done. And I just don't think he's I don't think he's replaceable. Like you said, baseball just doesn't really replace commissioners, and there's no one really to replace him with. That's high-ranking official in MLB right now.
Yeah, and he was hand selected by Bud Selig, the previous commissioner.
Yes.
So it's not like this is a thing where it's, we get to vote on a new commissioner. It could be anybody. It's probably going to be somebody within his circle. It's probably going to be somebody who aligns with a lot of his, beliefs and goals for the sport. So it'll be interesting. But I really want the baseball season to get going. Obviously, safely. Obviously, we saw the Phillies have an outbreak today. The Blue Jays closed down their facility, so it's just going to be tricky to see how they navigate this whole thing.
That's for sure. I mean, I think COVID, I'd rather see take the season down than I would them not being able to come to an agreement.
Sure.
Let's not fight over money when COVID's still going on. I mean, that's the problem here.
Right.
I'd much rather see a season, and I think it might be even good for baseball if COVID shuts down the season, and then the labor negotiations cool down,
gives
for about
them more
a year
time
or
to
so,
talk, and
then get back to the table. Right? Yeah. Maybe if a season is even imposed at 50 games, that might even be worse than COVID shutting it down. That may be the best case scenario for baseball right now, because delaying these talks as much as possible, because both sides, like I said, are just miles apart.
The animosity right now is at an all-time high, and I don't think it's going to get any better, especially if Manfred enforces a season that the players don't agree with, or whatever the case may be. So I think, like you said, maybe just let some tempers cool and get back to the bargaining table. And I think both sides kind of want the same thing. They want baseball to be played. They want fans to be packing the stadiums and to be, especially watching on television. That's where they get most of their revenue. So I think if it does shut down, it's not the worst thing in the world. Obviously, you eliminate the health risk, and hopefully the 2022 CBA gets resolved.
Yeah, that's about all you can hope for. Obviously, we do not want to see another lockout, especially after missing almost a whole year of baseball this year. Even if we get a 60-game season, I mean, it's just going to be impossible to have a lockout in 2022. It's terrible for the sport. Forrest says, I'm definitely on the player side, but I don't think a season is possible. You may be right. And like we said, COVID may be the best way to shut down the season at this point. I mean, it just may be.
Yeah, I don't know. What would you prefer? Would you say, okay, give me a 70-game season, or would you be fine with 50 games? I'm sure you would want as many games as possible.
That's tough. I go back and forth. I waver between both, because I think that a 50-game season is just nothing. I mean, why even play at that point?
Right.
And if Manfred does impose that 50-game season, he says you have to do it, players are going to go, well, we don't want to play. Like, why would we want to play for that? Okay, we're getting full prorated pay, but we don't want to play. So, and they're perfectly entitled to that right. And the 70 games makes sense. I mean, it just really does. 70 games is perfect. It still keeps you out of October for that second wave. We'll see what happens, but I don't really see a good outcome coming for this.
No, it's definitely not the result you wanted, and us being huge baseball fans, it's kind of sad to see. But I think of the minor leaguers too. Yeah, they're going to get paid, but they lose an entire year of development. So long term for them, I think it's bad. They've talked about doing expanded rosters, but here's my question to you: what do you think about the expanded playoffs moving forward, going to 16 teams from 10, which is a major step for the next 2 years at least?
I say Orioles 2021 World Series champions.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
No, but 16 teams is really interesting. I mean, that's a huge difference. I mean, you get 6 more teams getting in. There's going to be a lot of teams that don't deserve to be there that are going to be there, and the NFL is taking a same route kind of thing here. I think that expanding the playoffs makes them more money, because you get more teams
makes them more money
to broadcast games. And maybe that's what they need right now. MLB might need a little bit of stimulus right now. So I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't really see too many issues.
Yeah, I've always been, that's the only traditionalist baseball part of me, is I like the exclusivity of the 10 teams. It's going to help playoff revenues for sure. I'm curious to see if it tempers tanking at all. Like if teams say, okay, well, we have a legit shot to make the playoffs, are we going to still employ the same, okay, we're going to hold our talent in the minor leagues for another year or two? Be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like, you look at the Marlins as a team that just drafted Max Meyer, maybe an MLB ready arm, and you got
and they got JJ Bleday last year.
Yeah, and Spencer Torkelson too. All these guys that could possibly be in the majors because of this extended, playoffs. But we'll just have to see how it goes. I think that they're going to see a lot more revenue, which is always a good thing. And we can't leave the podcast without answering a fan question from Colin Altomari. He said, if we have any MLB season, should the Orioles purposely bomb the season for the number 1 pick? Kumar Rocker. Yes, in my opinion, totally yes. We've got to bomb the season. Rocker is a generational talent you don't see for decades. This is an incredible opportunity for us.
And who knows, how that's going to be determined. I think we really need to have clarity on the draft order. If it's going to be this season, if it's going to be, an accumulation of 2018 through 2020, who knows the scenario. If that's a scenario, I think the Orioles have the number 1 pick. I would 100%. You don't ever intentionally lose games. You never do that. But I would 100% hold back talent and say, we want Kumar Rocker. This is, if you want to win a World Series like the Cubs did it, like the Astros did it, we don't talk about that. But if you want to win a World Series, you need as much possible talent as you can, and then you fill in the gaps with free agents. And Kumar Rocker, doesn't matter what stadium you put him in, he's going to be a stud.
I can't wait to see him. I mean, this is, like I said, a generational talent. So I'm looking forward to it.
Anything else before we get out of here, Zach?
I'm good. That's all I had to say.
All right, let me get this hashtag up before we end the pod. And
RockerBottom, I like it. I like
hashtag RockerBottom. Thanks to Glenn Clark Radio for that.
Yes, sir.
So as always, follow us on Twitter. We are at Foul Pole Pod. We are growing on YouTube as we do this live show every week at 5:30 p.m. Have some interesting guests coming up, so please tune in next week. And thanks so much for listening. We're iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Podcast, Spotify, and we will talk to you next week.